All right, ready to dive into something a little unexpected.
Let's hear it.
Well, we're cracking open Oren Klaff's Pitch Anything.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Sales strategies for lawyers, right?
You got it. But this isn't just about closing deals.
No.
Think courtroom arguments, client presentations, even maybe negotiating that extra vacation day.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Klaff's approach is pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. So where do we even begin with Pitch Anything?
Well, he starts with a pretty radical idea.
Right.
To persuade anyone, you got to understand how the brain actually makes decisions.
So less about the legal arguments, more about the brain itself.
You got it. It's not always about logic.
Okay, so how do we tap into that then?
Klaff calls it the crocodile brain, the primal part of us.
Crocodile brain. Sounds a little intense. Should I be worried?
No reptiles in the courtroom. Think of it this way. The crocodile brain reacts instantly to threats, rewards, visuals especially. Not so much to, complex arguments. Data dumps.
So even in law, where things seem pretty logical, we're still driven by this primal instinct.
Absolutely. And that's why some legal strategies, they miss the mark. They target the neocortex, the thinking part. But to really win someone over.
You gotta appeal to the crocodile brain.
Exactly. It needs to feel safe. Like there's a reward, something new and exciting.
Makes sense. You're not just presenting evidence. It's like a story that needs to resonate on a deeper level, like that opening statement. Gotta grab the jury's attention right away.
You're catching on quick. And Klaff actually gives us a framework for this. Frame control, he calls it.
Frame control. Okay, now that sounds like we're getting into some Jedi mind tricks here.
Not quite manipulation, but it is about guiding the conversation subtly.
So whoever sets the frame
Controls the narrative, establishes their expertise, really influences how things turn out.
think of it like setting the stage for your arguments.
Exactly.
This is making me think about that story Klaff tells about facing down that venture capitalist, Jonathan. Talk about high pressure.
Oh yeah, Jonathan. He's a master of what Klaff calls power frames.
Power frames.
Think constant interruptions, questioning every revenue projection, downplaying the, secret sauce of the pitch. It's almost like watching a lawyer dismantle a witness on the stand.
So Jonathan is basically controlling the entire conversation.
Yeah.
Keeping Klaff on the defensive.
Exactly. And at first, Klaff falls right into his trap, tries to use logic, data, but Jonathan's not buying it. He's set the frame, and Klaff's playing by his rules. It's a classic example of what not to do in a high-stakes situation. Could be a pitch meeting, could be the courtroom.
Oof, yeah, I've been there. So how does Klaff turn things around? How does he escape this power frame?
He does something pretty brilliant. He stops trying to please Jonathan.
Oh,
He starts to subtly challenge that frame, redirects questions, pushes back against interruptions, and, even kind of playfully points out the flaws in Jonathan's assumptions.
he's shifting the power dynamic, showing Jonathan that, hey, he's got valuable insights too.
Exactly. It's a key shift. By taking control of the frame, Klaff forces Jonathan to see him as an equal, someone with knowledge, not just someone begging for money. He's not just pitching anymore. It's like a battle of wits.
Okay, wow. I can see how frame control could be huge for lawyers. Because those subtle power dynamics, they're everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
Negotiating a plea bargain, arguing a motion, even just presenting a case to a client.
Absolutely. It's all about, subtlety, nuance, using your words strategically.
And how you present yourself.
Right. It's about guiding that conversation to benefit your client, your case.
So we've got the crocodile brain, we got to engage in this frame control to direct the conversation, but how do we make those legal arguments stick? I feel like there's another Klaff insight coming here.
You're right on track. Klaff is a big believer in the power of storytelling, even in law.
It's funny because sometimes the most effective closing arguments, it's not the ones with all the legal jargon, it's the ones that tell a story, something the jury connects with emotionally.
100%. Klaff argues that just dry facts, figures, rarely move people to action. We need a narrative, something that resonates, shows the stakes, paints that picture of the outcome you want.
And Klaff illustrates this point with a pretty dramatic story, right?
Yeah.
Something about a near-death experience in a small plane.
Oh, yeah, it's quite a story. He's flying to a meeting, plane takes a nosedive.
I mean, talk about high pressure. I can see why that stuck with him, but how does this connect to storytelling?
He uses this intense experience to show how those visceral details, vivid imagery, a sense of urgency, they make a narrative unforgettable.
It's about grabbing that attention, making that emotional connection, and making your argument, stick. long after you've stopped speaking.
Right.
So instead of just reciting facts, we need to weave them into a narrative that resonates with the jury, make them feel the impact, not just understand it, right?
Think about it. You're representing someone who's been injured. Instead of just, listing medical bills, lost wages, you tell the story of their life before the accident, what they love to do, how things have changed because of the defendant's negligence.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. It's about connecting on a human level,
Yeah.
making them invested in the outcome.
Exactly. And this applies beyond juries, too. Think client meetings. A well-crafted story can help explain even complex legal stuff, make them feel more confident in you.
This is fascinating. It's like learning this whole new language, a language of persuasion.
And once you understand these principles, you can apply them everywhere. Client meetings, courtroom arguments, even negotiating that next vacation, like you said.
All right, so far we've got the crocodile brain, frame control, and the power of storytelling. But there's one more piece of the pitch anything puzzle I'm dying to unpack. Pricing.
Ah, yes. Pricing. It can seem counterintuitive, especially in law,
It does.
but it's about positioning yourself as the valuable asset, not just a service provider.
So you're saying make the client, the judge, even opposing counsel, feel like they need to earn the benefit of our expertise. Like we're doing them a favor by taking the case.
You got it. And Klaff uses a pretty interesting analogy to get this point across. He compares being a lawyer to being a, wait for it, French waiter.
A French waiter.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard some interesting analogies. This one takes the cake. How in the world does being a lawyer compare to being a French waiter?
Well, think about it. Especially those in high-end restaurants, they have this way of controlling the entire dining experience. They're not subservient, they're subtly assertive, making recommendations, guiding diners, really shaping that whole experience.
It's like having this aura of, what, confidence.
Yeah.
Making the client feel like they're getting something exclusive, they're lucky to have us.
Exactly. Instead of chasing clients, we're making them feel like they're the ones being chosen. It's a subtle shift, but it can really change how people see you, your value.
Okay, I love how these small shifts in how we say things, how we frame things can make such a big difference. But, and I gotta ask, how do we do this without sounding arrogant? Especially for, younger lawyers just starting out.
It's all about subtlety, being genuine. You emphasize the value you bring, your expertise, your commitment to their case. That track record, if you have one, you make them feel like they're not just hiring a lawyer, they're getting a partner invested in their success.
So how would this sound in real conversation? How do we show this pricing thing?
Well, for example, instead of saying, I can take on your case, you might say, based on my experience, I believe I'm uniquely positioned to achieve a favorable outcome for you. See? Subtle shift, but it highlights you as the expert.
I like it. You're showcasing your value without bragging.
Exactly. Confidence, not arrogance. Let that expertise speak for itself.
Mind-blowing stuff. I can already see how these principles could change how I approach my whole practice. But wow, we've just scratched the surface here. What else can we expect to uncover as we keep diving into pitch anything?
Well, in part two, we're going even deeper into how the brain works. Those emotions, driven by, well, think dopamine and norepinephrine, they play a huge role in decision-making. And we'll talk about using visual aids and other sensory things to make your arguments even stronger.
So we're getting into the brain science, huh? Uncovering those secrets to make our arguments irresistible. Can't wait to dive into all of that in part two. Everyone, make sure you join us.
Welcome back to our Pitch Anything deep dive.
All right, round two.
We've talked about that crocodile brain.
Right, got to appeal to that primal side.
Exactly. And, using frame control to really set the stage.
Like setting the scene for persuasion.
You
Right?
got it. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty, how our brains actually make decisions.
Okay, brain science time. Hit me with those insights. I'm ready to make my arguments irresistible.
But get this, even in law, a field that's all about logic, emotions play a huge role.
Emotions? I mean, yeah, I guess I can see that. Think about jury trials.
Mhm.
Sometimes a closing argument, a really powerful one, it's more impactful than mountains of evidence.
Exactly. We like to think we're super rational, weighing all those pros and cons, but those gut feelings, those are driven by emotions. And they often guide our choices more than we realize.
So less about logic, more about tapping into those gut feelings.
You got it. And that's where things get really interesting. We got to understand those neurochemicals. Dopamine, norepinephrine. They're the driving force.
Dopamine or epinephrine. Okay, you're piquing my curiosity here. Break it down for me. What are those and how can lawyers use them?
All right, so dopamine, think of it as the reward chemical. It's what gets released when we're anticipating something good. Pleasure, a positive outcome.
So, like when I win a big case or finally get to take that vacation.
Exactly. Now apply that to a legal context. If you can trigger that dopamine release in your audience, whether it's the judge, the jury, a client,
They're going to be more open to what you're saying.
because they associate it with something positive.
So it's not just about the legal details. It's about creating that sense of a positive outcome.
Exactly. And that's where, remember, Klaff talks about intrigue, novelty, presenting things in a way that's unexpected, exciting. You're tapping into that brain's reward system.
It's like when a lawyer uses a really good analogy, right, or a story to explain a complex point. It makes it stick.
Exactly. Now, norepinephrine, that's a bit different. It's more about alertness, arousal. It kicks in when we sense a threat or a challenge.
Ah, so it's kind of the opposite of dopamine. Instead of reward, it's more like urgency, like those last-minute filing deadlines, always sneaking up on me.
You nailed it. And look, it might not sound pleasant, but that norepinephrine, it can be just as effective as dopamine in keeping your audience engaged.
Wait, really? Wouldn't creating that sense of threat make people less likely to agree with you?
Not necessarily. It's about using it strategically. If you
Yeah.
subtly highlight the negative consequences of not doing something, you create urgency. They're compelled to act.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works. So, like, if I'm trying to convince a client to settle a case, I can emphasize the risks of going to trial, right? Make that settlement offer seem more appealing.
Precisely. You're highlighting the potential downsides. Suddenly, your solution seems way better.
This is pretty fascinating. So it's
Yeah.
about finding that balance, right? Dopamine, norepinephrine, little excitement, a little urgency, keeps everyone engaged.
You're getting it. Klaff calls this tapping into hot cognitions. It's about going beyond just cold, hard logic.
Hot cognitions. I like that. We're appealing to the gut, not just the analytical mind. But how do we actually do that?
Well, powerful visuals, for one. Klaff talks about visual intrigue pinging.
Okay, got to ask about this one. This is where he brings up jet porn, right? Memorable story, but how do lawyers use that ethically? Can't exactly be flashing pictures of luxury vacations during a trial.
Of course not. But the idea is there. You use images, objects, something striking to grab attention, and it needs to connect to your argument. Think about how you can use visual aids to make your points hit harder, make them memorable.
Okay, so like instead of just talking about injuries from a car accident, we could show the jury a picture of the wreckage or a diagram, something to really drive home the impact.
Exactly. You're not just talking about it. You're making them see it, feel it.
This is making me rethink how I approach everything. I think as lawyers, we can get so focused on the technical stuff, we forget about the power of visuals, of storytelling.
And remember, it's not just visuals. Language is powerful too. Paint a picture with your words. Use imagery, metaphors, make it relatable.
So instead of just saying the defendant breached the contract, we could say something like, the defendant's actions ripped apart the fabric of trust.
There you go. You're using language that evokes a response, an emotion. You're tapping into those hot cognitions.
This is incredible. I'm seeing how this could completely change how I approach legal arguments.
And remember, it's not just about courtroom drama. These techniques, they work everywhere. Negotiating settlements, writing briefs, even convincing your partner to try that new restaurant.
Okay, this is game-changing stuff.
It is.
But before we wrap up part 2, what else can we expect in the final part of this deep dive?
Well, in part 3, we're going to analyze one of the most gripping stories in the book. Klaff's billion-dollar airport pitch. High stakes, a tough competitor. We'll break down how he uses everything we've talked about to secure that win.
A billion-dollar airport pitch. I am on the edge of my seat. Everyone be sure to join us for part 3, where we see Klaff's techniques in action and uncover even more insights you can use. Back for the final act of our Pitch Anything deep dive.
I'm ready to see it all come together.
Absolutely. We've explored the crocodile brain, learned about framing, tapped into those hot cognitions. Now let's see those techniques in action.
Time for Oren Klaff's legendary airport pitch, right? Billion-dollar deal on the line.
That's the one. High stakes.
He's not just up against a tough client. He's facing Timothy Chance. From Goldhammer, no less.
Goldhammer. I mean, those guys are known for snagging the big deals.
Exactly. It's like David versus Goliath, but with, brain science and storytelling instead of slingshots.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
So what's the setup?
Well, the client, Simon Jeffries, he throws a curveball. Wants both firms to pitch at the same time. Same room.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a power move.
Right. He's not just listening, he's watching how they handle the pressure, how they think on their feet.
It's like having opposing counsel right there in the room, analyzing your every move.
Exactly. And Klaff, he knows he needs more than just, a solid financial plan. Goldhammer, they're all about the numbers. He needs to stand out.
This is where understanding that crocodile brain comes in. It's not just logic and reason.
Yeah.
Got to tap into those primal instincts, right?
You got it. Klaff. He remembers a key insight. The brain, it craves status, not just money.
So you're saying Simon Jeffries, he's not just looking for profit, he's looking for legacy.
You nailed it. Something that'll cement his name in history. And Klaff brilliantly positions this deal as just that. Not just an airport, but a chance to invest in American history.
He's taking something, well, kind of dry, like a contract, and turning it into a story.
He's selling the idea of building a legacy, something that'll be remembered for generations. Even uses these big posters, the tagline, invest in an American legacy.
Visuals, tapping into those hot cognitions, literally putting that desire for a legacy front and center. Smart.
Right. And then he shares a personal story about visiting Spring Hill, where the airport's going to be. Talks about the people he met, their dreams, how this project could change their lives.
He's painting the picture, the human impact. It's not just buildings and runways, it's real-world stuff.
While Goldhammer is stuck in spreadsheets, Klaff is connecting on a deeper level.
Appealing to the heart, not just the head. It's a perfect example of how understanding those hot cognitions, those emotional triggers, can change everything.
And it works. The client is captivated. He sees this airport as a chance to make a real difference.
David takes down Goliath, with a little help from brain science.
Exactly. This story shows how when you understand these principles of persuasion, it can change any interaction, from client meetings to, well, even everyday life.
This whole pitch anything deep dive has been eye-opening. We've learned about the crocodile brain, frame control, storytelling, even pricing.
And the biggest takeaway, persuasion isn't about tricks. It's about understanding how we think, connecting with people on that deeper level, inspiring them to act.
So whether you're a lawyer, a law student, or just someone who wants to be more persuasive, remember what we've talked about today.
A well-crafted pitch, an argument, even just a story told with conviction, it can make a real impact.
Think about that crocodile brain, all those tools we've uncovered.
You might just be surprised what you can achieve.
And that's a wrap on Pitch Anything. Hope you found it as fascinating as we did. Until next time, everyone.